What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Touchline Talk here on 110 Sports. This is about as busy of a midweek period as I can remember. You've got, of course, all the Champions League action. We're going to get to Europa League today, obviously, and Barcelona getting a change in leadership with Joseph Bartomeu resigning. Major League Soccer's going full swing into the playoff push. More significant results, more teams clinching playoff berths with all of their games last night. We're going to get to all of it here on the show today, but we're going to start with a little Champions League roundup, going through everything that's happened these past couple days. Tuesday's games, the theme was teams avoiding disasters. Most notably Real Madrid, who score in the 87th and 93rd minutes after Marcus Thuram rips them apart on the counter twice to give Borussia Mönchengladbach a 2-0 lead. And they're still at the bottom of this group with that 1 point after the loss to Shakhtar. But this situation looks so much better than it could have when you were staring at another loss and a multi-goal loss in the 85th minute of this game. I was really curious to see how Real Madrid was going to respond after getting the big win in El Clasico. It was not a great performance, and it was one of those games where the stats kind of deceive you because it's not like Gladbach had all that much of the ball or were doing all that much. It was just they were lethal on the counter. It played into what they wanted to do. They played this game on their terms. But again, I will continue to point to the resiliency of Zinedine Zidane's teams and just the mental toughness that they have. They find a way to get a point, and then you pair that with the Inter draw at Shakhtar, and all of a sudden Shakhtar is still at the top of this group, which could very easily change considering the other three teams in it. And Real Madrid is right there, a point behind Inter and Gladbach, who have 2 draws to Real Madrid's 1. One team has won a game in this group, and that's Shakhtar, which is incredible in and of itself. But, for example, had Inter won in Shakhtar and Gladbach found a way to close this game out, Real Madrid is in a terrible situation, and I think a situation, if I remember correctly, only 12 teams have ever come out of, which is losing your first 2 games. Now it looks much more doable. They still have plenty of work to do, but this could have been a catastrophe, and they found a way to keep themselves alive. Another team that avoided a disaster was Atalanta. Duvan Zapata scores twice in the second half to also get a 2-2 draw, this coming against Ajax. It was not pretty, and Atalanta has really been struggling outside of the beatdown they put on Midtjylland. But again, you find a way to get a point, and Liverpool rests their front three, but they get a 2-0 win over Midtjylland. They bring in Salah for the second half, lose Fabinho to injury. These injuries just continue to stockpile. They just don't have the bodies right now, but they find ways to get wins. That team should still beat Midtjylland, but they did do that, which makes these Atalanta-Ajax games that much more important in terms of determining who's going to be the second team out of that group, because I don't see Liverpool collapsing. They put themselves in a really good spot. They've given themselves room for a bad game here or there. They should be fine. And eventually some of these guys are going to come back. So now Atalanta has this point, and they still got to play Liverpool twice, but you wouldn't put it past them to beat them the way they can score. And they obviously have an opportunity to beat Ajax the second time around. Ajax is putting themselves in a good position, but by getting this draw, Atalanta at least gives themselves a real chance. And it looked for a while like they were going to be in real trouble instead. Also, on the theme of avoiding disaster, Atletico Madrid gets 2 goals from João Felix to get past Red Bull Salzburg 3-2. Salzburg just kept coming back and finding ways to score and equalize, but at the end of the day, it was João Felix who made the difference in this game. It's a game you expect Atletico Madrid to win. It wasn't pretty, but they got the job done. It's concerning the amount of goals they're giving up right now because they've been inconsistent offensively. Sometimes they get their 3 goals and sometimes they can't do anything. Looking into La Liga and a wide open race, that's my concern and why I've been disappointed with Atleti so far, because I really think they can win that league, but they haven't been consistent enough for me. The bigger point I want to make out of this game in particular, though, is that this Salzburg team is brave. You have got to give Jesse Marsch credit. They are coming in and giving these big time teams, both this season and last season, everything they can handle. They just don't have the complete team to knock them off. But you look at some of this top end talent that's coming through there. From Erling Haaland, and now you've got this next group who's going to be household names pretty soon here and playing for big teams. They are producing an incredible amount of talent, and they don't come and sit back and try and come away with a point. They're trying for all three. They're trying to win. They're attacking. They're aggressive. They're brave. It's a lot of fun to watch, and we're to the point where we need to stop being excited about Jesse Marsch being an American coach who is U.S. through and through, coaching in the Champions League, and start looking at him as one of the better up-and-coming coaches in Europe. That's how impressed I've been with what Salzburg's been able to do. And yes, it's great to have a guy whose dream job is coaching the U.S. national team, coaching in the Champions League. But to me, this isn't even about Jesse Marsch being a U.S. guy. Of course, that's the reason we're paying more attention to him. But I genuinely think he's establishing himself on the European stage and putting himself in a position for an even better job. He is just a really good coach, regardless of where he comes and the fact that he came through Major League Soccer and all of that. He's doing what Christian Pulisic and others have done on the player side, which is just have so much success and be so good that there's no stigma attached with you being American anymore. It's just, this guy's really good at what he does. And that's where Jesse Marsch has gotten for me. Your other games on Tuesday, Joshua Kimmich's late winner gets Bayern past Lokomotiv Moscow. You have these kind of games every once in a while. I'm not concerned for Bayern. They had room to play with, and they still found a way to win this game. They're just not going to be perfect every time out. They're not in quite the form that they were at the end of last season. And you have weird results in the group stage sometimes. That's why everybody plays everybody twice. But they get the job done. Strikerless Manchester City look much better in their 3-0 win over Marseille. Raheem Sterling was sort of the star of the show in this one, playing as that striker even though he's not a striker. Because you lose Aguero to another injury, it was not great over the weekend. We didn't talk about all that much, but they looked rather lifeless and kind of out of ideas, which is not something you typically say about Pep Guardiola coach teams. This one was much better. Marseille is in big trouble trying to get out of that group, as I talked about on Tuesday, because they couldn't do anything in this game. It's just hard to know what to make Manchester City right now, because sometimes you get performances like this and you feel like they're rounding the corner, and once they get a striker back, they're going to be fine. And then other times it's what happened over the weekend, and you wonder if they need to go a different direction because Pep is just not getting his message across and getting these guys to respond the way he needs. So we'll see. I'm not willing to jump on the Pep is the problem bandwagon quite yet, but they just need to be more consistent all the way around. Porto score early and then get another one late to beat Olympiacos 2-0 to put themselves in a position to get out of this group behind Manchester City. Really good win for them. Wednesday's action, to me, The storyline is that the big boys showed up, starting with Barcelona taking down Juventus in Turin 2-0. Yes, there was no Ronaldo. Paulo Dybala got inserted back into the starting lineup by Andrea Pirlo, which is not something that's happened very often this season. The first goal, Ousmane Dembele gets a deflection after Messi plays a beautiful ball across the field. That's the kind of thing that he can do, that you're looking at that Juventus team and you just don't see somebody with the ability to make that kind of pass, and that was ultimately the difference in this game. And then he adds the PK later to make it 2-0. This was a massive win for Barcelona just because they need to believe they can play with these kind of teams with everything going on right now. And we're going to get to the president situation and Bartomeu resigning in segment 2 after we take our break. But now Messi and company have gotten what they wanted, so you got to back it up on the field and prove that you can still take care of business. And Juventus were not particularly good, and this wraps up a week of incredibly unfortunate events, from the injuries and Ronaldo not being able to play because he's still not COVID free, to Alvaro Morata getting 3 goals called back for offside in this game, and all of which were close. I think they were all the right calls, but it wasn't a blatant error by the assistant referees. It was inches, millimeters, really, really close calls, and he just was a little bit off every time. That's in addition to the draw they had over the weekend, where they weren't great, but they had a bunch of shots, and he had another goal called back, and they just couldn't get all 3 points against Verona. So they're not in a great place. It's not like this win does a lot to change where I feel like Barcelona sit in the European hierarchy, but it does do a little bit to change what I think they can ultimately be and the point they can get to this season. They just played like a team that had a weight lifted off their shoulders, because they did. It wasn't perfect. There are still major flaws on that roster, and in the construction they were missing center backs and easily could have given up 3 goals to Morata. But ultimately, Messi made the difference. He just looked happier and freer, and at this point, that's the most important thing for Barcelona. They're in a position to take control of this group and finish first, which also helps you, obviously, getting a better draw in the knockout stage for the round of 16. They just needed something good to happen on the back of everything that's gone on this week, and they absolutely got that. Manchester United also keep picking up incredible results in Europe. They get a 5-0 win over Leipzig. Marcus Rashford comes off the bench and nets a hat-trick, with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer shaking things up considerably. Donny van de Beek gets a start. Paul Pogba's back in the starting lineup. Mason Greenwood comes out of the doghouse to score the opener and gets to start. And then Rashford comes on and blows this game up. It was 1-1 and then it was 1-0 and then it was 5-0. Just like that in the second half after he got going. And I love this hat trick in particular because of how clinical he was. They weren't the most spectacular goals in the world. They also weren't tap-ins and gimmies. But he came onto the field and he just took every chance, pretty much every chance he got. He found a breakaway and he just continued to finish. They were clinical. He's just really good execution. I loved the way that these goals looked, and you just knew every time he was in on goal, he was one-on-one with the keeper. Every time he had a chance, you just knew he was going to finish. It was a remarkable display from him. And this is the conclusion I've come to about United and the thing that really stood out to me about this game. I don't think it's as difficult to predict what you're going to get from them as it seems like it is, or as difficult as I even thought it was before I really started reflecting on this and trying to see if there's a pattern there. And I found one that to me makes sense. What you saw in this game is that Manchester United are lethal on the counter. With that front three, the pace they have, Rashford's finishing ability, Greenwood's finishing ability, Martial is not quite on their same level in terms of finishing, but he's not a poor finisher by any means either. They are really good when they get their chances, and they're really good at creating them on the counter. That's how they're built. That's why they were so successful when that front three started playing together at the end of last season. And so when you're playing these higher profile teams in Europe, PSG, Leipzig, Solskjaer can justify playing more on the counter, playing a more counter-attacking style, and it suits his team so much better. That's where they're at their best. That's where they're one of the best teams in the world. There are very few teams that can counter the way that Manchester United can. So PSG control large portions of that game, but they don't take their chances, and Manchester United get a couple opportunities and they take them. And this one, Leipzig plays a very specific way, and the scoreline is deceiving because this was 1-0 for a vast majority of the game, and then Rashford happened. But they've got a very specific style of play. By playing on the counter, you kind of take them out of that because they want to press you, they want to run, they want to counter, they want to do all those things. So it creates an inconvenience for them and makes them do something different, and they're not very good at doing things different. They're a Red Bull team. There's one way that Red Bull teams play. So when you look at it in that sense, there's no doubting the talent Manchester United has. So it makes sense that they're able to play this more defensive, counter-attacking style and have success with it because they're so good going forward on the counter, and they've got some clinical finishers up front. And a guy like Pogba and a guy like Bruno Fernandes that can make those passes and can cut defenses open on the counter. So it doesn't necessarily have to be pretty or an incredibly convincing performance from a statistical standpoint, but you get results like you've gotten these first two games in the Champions League. On the other side of that, Solskjaer cannot justify playing that kind of style against your Crystal Palaces of the world in the Premier League. Regardless of whether it would be more successful or not, as Manchester United, you just can't play that way against these mid-table, lower-table Premier League teams. And that's where you're seeing Manchester United struggle. Now, it wasn't particularly pretty against Chelsea. Neither team did much offensively, but Rashford had a couple of chances. But look at where United have struggled. They've beaten Manchester City. They then got a win against PSG. That's not the issue. The issue is, can you consistently take care of business and beat the teams you're supposed to? And that's where they're having trouble. And that is why I don't see any way where they finish top 4 this season. Because they'll do it for stretches. But they were so poor at the beginning of last season that even that incredible stretch they had barely got them in, and had Leicester not capitulated and been injured, they wouldn't have gotten in. They caught a massive break, and to their credit, they took advantage and then backed their way in after some shaky results against teams they should have beaten at the end of last season. We can't forget that part of this too. And so now you've got much more pressure coming because Spurs are in really good form, looking really good with all of these new pieces. Chelsea, who we're going to get to in a minute here, another clean sheet. They're looking much better. You got Liverpool, you've got City, Everton, Leicester's as good as they were last season and slowly getting healthier. Aston Villa, who knows if they can keep something up. You had a real opportunity last season, and United found a way to take advantage, but you got to be more consistent, which is weird to say because of the inconsistency of this season. But ultimately, I think some of these teams are going to figure it out, and we're going to get a little more normalcy involved. So that's my concern for United. These results in Europe don't change how I ultimately feel about them. Sure, they can win the Champions League or beat anybody on any given day. They got the talent. But can you figure out a way to not have those head-scratching results, to not get destroyed by Tottenham or lose to Crystal Palace? Can you start winning games at home? This was their first home win all season. Those are all the things that you can't answer with one really good performance. And that I still believe are systemic issues inside this team. It's going to be good sometimes. It's going to be awful sometimes. The teams that are going to ultimately have success and teams that are going to win Premier League titles are the teams that are really good and okay, or you find a way to salvage results when it's not pretty the way Liverpool are right now. So pay attention to that for United. They're at their best when they can play against teams that are every bit as good as they are, and they can sit there and play on the counter. They've had real trouble playing against your Brightons and Crystal Palaces of the world this season. And to me, that's not as much of a coincidence as it may seem when you really think about it and look at what United do and the way things look when they're putting together performances like they did against Leipzig. The front three score in this game, all three of them. Martial adds a late penalty. It was really impressive. But can you do it consistently? Can you do it in the Premier League? This doesn't change how I feel about that. I still think the answer is they can't do it consistently enough. PSG, Dortmund, Chelsea all win by multiple goals. PSG get a double from Moise Kean with some help from Kylian Mbappe setting him up. Neymar exits with an injury, but they still find a way to get this win that they had to have. And now, with that result, United is in really good position and PSG's in the driver's seat for the second spot in that group. And if they can find a way to beat United, and they still got a chance to win the group, but Leipzig is now, to me, that third team that missed an opportunity even to get a point in that game. PSG take care of business, so they're sort of back on track. Dortmund leave it late, but get a Jadon Sancho penalty kick, and then Haaland adds a second to get their much-needed win. Chelsea take care of business against Krasnodar. Christian Pulisic, Hakim Ziyech will score their first goals of the season. And I'm going to keep harping on this on Chelsea, but look at their defensive performances when Edouard Mendy's in net. 4 straight shutouts across all competitions. One of them against Sevilla, another against Manchester United, who just scored 5 on the last season's Champions League semifinalists. Yeah, he's that important. And that defense is that much better when you have Ben Chilwell at left back and a goalkeeper that's not making mistakes and just gives you some confidence in that. I'm still a believer in this Chelsea team, and all of that criticism facing Frank Lampard is quickly becoming quiet. Now, the Kepa signing in and of itself and the massive fee they paid, that's a big question. But right now, for the purposes of this conversation, they're playing really well and they have cleaned things up at the back. And now all of these weapons are starting to score goals and they're all healthy and available to play. Keep your eye out for Chelsea. I think this is just the beginning. This is the team you're going to see for the most of the rest of the season. Sevilla dominate proceedings and get a 1-0 win thanks to Luke de Jong, who continues to score in Europe, over Rennes to put themselves in a really good spot to be the second team coming out of this group. You get a draw against Chelsea, then you get 3 points against the third team in that group. So they're in good shape. Lazio get a really good point on the road with their COVID-depleted squad. And then your final game here, Ferencvarosi battle back from 2-0 down for a 2-0 draw against Dynamo Kiev in a game that is ultimately not going to matter all that much. But you could tell what it meant to their fans. It was a cool atmosphere to see those fans there and get to celebrate that comeback. both these and this could have, I shouldn't say it doesn't ultimately matter. This could have significant ramifications in terms of who gets that third spot and gets to go down to the Europa League. But ultimately, it's one of those Champions League games that you're playing for third place and you're playing just to have the experience and celebrate being in the Champions League because neither of these teams are getting out of that group. So that is our Champions League rundown, everything that happened Tuesday and Wednesday. Again, my storylines Tuesday, some noteworthy teams avoiding disasters, getting results that keep them alive and in the conversation. Whereas Wednesday, your traditional powers, your big boys showed up, got the job done, headlined by Barcelona and Manchester United. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're talking Bartomeu, Barcelona, what the change in leadership means, and why it's only the first step in getting Barcelona back to where they expect to be, as well as his declaration that Barcelona have agreed to join this European Super League that is allegedly forming but isn't actually anywhere near official, and a little bit of Major League Soccer talk, recapping last night and the teams that are in the postseason as of right now as we get closer and closer to the start of the playoffs. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. Don't go anywhere.